Hello, you made the trip, the Eugene Cannabis TV show. We got episode number 541 already, and I'm all by my lonesome tonight. I've got some great stories news stories to talk about. The first one is a blog that's written by Johnny Green, and that's on the theweedblog.com. So he wrote, "Is Dear Media, marijuana prohibition is no laughing matter." Not that long ago, Barack Obama was asked at a Medium event to respond to the fact that the #1 petition on the White House, We the People, Your Voice in Our Government site was asking about marijuana legalization. Barack Obama smirked and chuckled at the question, as if it was a joke. Many media members that were in the audience laughed as well. In a recent episode of Meet the Press, the topic was marijuana legalization. And again, the media members on the show laughed repeatedly throughout the conversation. Even on my local sports radio channel yesterday, they were talking about marijuana legalization and laughed throughout the segment. What is so funny about marijuana reform? I get it that consuming marijuana can give people the giggles, especially inexperienced consumers. I get that one of the first things that comes to mind for many people in society when they think of marijuana is a Cheech and Chong comedy. However, when we were talking about marijuana prohibition, not marijuana entertainment or bong sessions, there's nothing funny about it. Marijuana reform is a very harmful public policy that has ruined lives and wasted resources. That's not funny. African Americans are almost 4 times as likely to be arrested for marijuana compared to white people, even though consumption rates are about proportionally the same between races. In some areas of America, the number can be over 8 times as likely for African Americans. American prohibition is a racist public policy. Explain to me how that's funny. Racism is never funny, especially when it involves public policy. Marijuana prohibition is an enormous waste of law enforcement resources. In Oregon, where I live, a medical marijuana dispensary was raided in southern Oregon, which involved 70 officers. The same weekend that 70 officers were dedicated to raiding the safe access point, a lady in southern Oregon called police to report that her ex-husband was trying to enter her residence to harm her, and that she had a restraining order against him. She was told there weren't any officers that they could send. The lady was assaulted and raped as a result. 70 officers can be dedicated to raiding a harmless medical marijuana dispensary, which later had almost all of the charges dropped that were involved with the raid, yet there's not even one officer that can be sent to enforce a restraining order? How is that funny? Jail cells should be dedicated to real criminals like pedophiles, rapists, murderers, etc. However, people are sitting in jails across the country right now for marijuana-only offenses. Jeff Mizanski is sitting in a prison cell in Missouri right now serving a life sentence for marijuana-only offenses. His family will never see him outside of the prison's walls, and his wife is virtually gone due to activity involving a plant that has never. His life, is virtually gone due to activity involving a plant that has never killed anyone. Meanwhile, a violent criminal that should be sitting in that same cell is out on the streets due to prison overcrowding. When that same violent criminal harms another human being, I wonder if Obama and members of the media would be laughing then. Marijuana prohibition puts marijuana sales into the hands of cartels and gangs. People are dying near the Mexican-United States border in horrific ways at the hands of cartels. Gangs that profit from black market marijuana sales are making law-abiding citizens in neighborhoods live in constant fear. If marijuana was legalized, sales would go out of the shadows and into regulated outlets, and cartels and gangs would be devastated. Instead, cartels and gangs continue to profit off the misery of innocent people. People will continue to get their heads chopped off in Mexico because rather than have a constructive, productive conversation about marijuana prohibition, Obama and mainstream media would rather chuckle and make pot puns. If this was happening with any other public policy issue of this magnitude, the world would be outraged and would call out the White House and the American media for being heartless cowards. But instead, because it's marijuana, the laughs continue, despite the overwhelming evidence that marijuana prohibition has failed and is ruining lives. So that's a great blog by Johnny Green. Brings up some great points, and I saw that same Meet the Press episode and thought the same thing. Here they are giggling and obviously clueless of what the real issues and what it's really all about. And I've got a next story here that's real exciting. This is a report, an article that was in Eugene Weekly, written by the editor of Eugene Weekly, Ted Taylor, and sum up of the meeting between, not a meeting, but a panel discussion about the Initiative 53, the legalization initiative. Titled Oregon's Legal Weed Measure Explained. Legalization of marijuana for adult use qualified for the November ballot the same day. A panel of legalization advocates outlined how the new Measure 53 will work if it passes. What will it do? How is it different from Washington and Colorado's marijuana laws? What will be the impact on the Oregon medical marijuana program? How will the tax revenue be allocated? What about hemp? What about the huge black market that currently distributes pot? A Stirring the Pot discussion July 22nd, sponsored by Eugene Weekly, drew about 100 people to Cosmic. Speakers were Anthony Johnson, chief petitioner for the New Approach Oregon Initiative, Paul Stanford, who spearheaded Measure 80 that failed to get enough votes to pass in 2012, and Senator Floyd Pazanski, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee. Moderator was Rick Levin, Eugene Weekly staff writer. Johnson said pot legalization will be set up similar to how beer and wine are regulated with licenses through the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, taxed and only for adults over the age of 21. He said OLCC will collect taxes of $35 per ounce for flowers, $10 per ounce for leaves, and $5 for every marijuana plant that's sold. 40% of the revenue generated will go to education, 35% to state and local law enforcement, and 20% to the Oregon Health Authority for mental health and substance abuse treatment programs. The OLCC will have a year to work on rules before the law goes into effect. Limited home cultivation will be allowed, he said, similar to home brewing and making your own wine. And the measure explicitly protects the Oregon medical marijuana program and will allow the growing and sale of industrial hemp. This will open up a new market for farmers who are currently not allowed to grow industrial hemp, Johnson said. And overall, the legislation will generate millions of dollars in new revenue for our state. Licensing fees will be set at $1,250 for any license, whether it be wholesaler, retailer, producer, or processor. Those who qualify for an OMMP card and pay their annual fee will be exempt from taxes imposed on non-OMMP pot. The current OMMP fee is $200 with discounts for those on state assistance or supplemental security income. Pazanski has long supported legalization of marijuana and hemp and said, New Approach Oregon has taken the lead and they have a very sound piece of legislation, one that I will be supporting. He also supports the new law being run by the OLCC, since this agency, more than any other, has experience in this form of regulation, enforcement, and taxation. Pazanski was critical of the marijuana programs in Washington and Colorado and said Oregon's program will be much better and will therefore discourage the black market and the organized crime that goes with it. Washington does not allow home cultivation and only allows possession of up to 1 ounce. If you have over 40 grams, which is 1.4 ounces, you go to jail. Colorado's program is particularly onerous and overregulated, he said, even requiring live video feeds from every grow operation to a central state agency. In Colorado, marijuana stores have to grow 70% of what they sell, and in Washington, growers cannot sell at all. Oregon's measure allows vertical integration. You can be a producer, a processor, and a retailer, and not be taxed until you sell to a customer. Przansky is a prosecutor as well as lawmaker, and was asked about all the thousands of people who are in jail or awaiting trial on pot charges. The measure doesn't affect any previous convictions or sentences, he said, but I expect to see DAs looking at reality and changing practices and dropping charges. We may need a legislative fix. Wrapping up the evening's panel, Johnson said, many people put in years of work to make this happen, and here in Eugene, I want to give a shout out to Jim Gregg, who was a tireless advocate for this cause. Jim died June 16th, and I'll be talking about his memorial at a later point. We need a thoroughly well-funded campaign because marijuana is not going to legalize itself, said Johnson. It's going to take people all over the state volunteering, contributing, and doing what they can to make sure we win this election. We're ready to end marijuana prohibition and stop treating this like a crime. So that's a good write-up by Ted Taylor, and we appreciate Eugene Weekly having that event. And it was really interesting. The thing I learned from this, probably the biggest thing, is the fact that OMMP, I've heard some, especially on Facebook, some people are saying, well, this measure 53, which, by the way, it's initiative 53, but now it's changed because now it's going to be on the ballot, and it's a measure, and they've assigned a new number to it. So from now on, we'll be talking about M91, which is the same one. It's called New Approach Oregon. So anyway, and according, there's been a lot of, actually talking on Facebook, people saying, well, it's going to hurt the Oregon medical marijuana program. It's going to do this, do that to the program. It's not going to do anything to the program, not to the law. It states two different places in that measure that it will not affect the will not affect the Oregon medical marijuana law. Also, it's interesting that I just found out from reading this is that a patient is paid their fee that they are exempt from taxes imposed on non-OMMP pot. So that's really good news, and that's a nice point of that measure. There's things about the measure that I'm not crazy about myself, but I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So I'm saying yes, let's vote. That's measure 91. We definitely want it in. And as far as the comments on Senator Przansky, I expect to see DAs looking at reality and changing practicing and dropping charges. That may happen in a few counties, but I'm sure there's going to be holdouts like Marquis. Anyway, we'll talk more about him another time. But so anyway, we're going to take a break here, and this is the end of the first segment of episode number 541. So stick around, and we'll be talking about the latest Stop the Drug War Chronicles. We'll be updating you on that. So come on back. We'll be here waiting.
Some marijuana with some people I like, just like everybody does from the East Coast to the West. I didn't even notice the cop on the bike, didn't know I was about to be the 20 millionth marijuana arrest. Should have fought for marijuana law reform, should have gone to the web and typed in norm. Norm to the L.org, norm will drop the A.org, baby.
National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
Hi, you could be on the show, you could just watch, come by and visit. See you next time. Just went through a couple of news stories. We're talking about Measure 91, which is the new name for I-53, which is the New Approach Oregon initiative to legalize or at least further decriminalize possession of marijuana. So I just want to make sure that we want to make a couple more points on this. Is that it's up to us now. It's on the ballot. So make sure everyone in your circle is registered to vote, and make sure you're registered to vote, and don't put it off. Do it, because it's really important, especially the naysayers, the ones that say, well, I don't register to vote, it didn't do any good. Well, it can do good this time, and we need the numbers. I'm convinced it'll pass, but don't just sit back and say, well, cool, it'll pass. No, you need to get out there and put and vote, because the larger the margin that it passes, the more likely we're going to be able to defend it from the Oregon legislature. I'm here to tell you, as an activist of 15 years, I've been to the Oregon legislature. They are going to they're going to come after this legalization bill. It's not going to be pretty. So we've got to be ready to fight. And so when the legislation comes into effect, just be ready. But anyway, but right now we need to register to vote, like I said, and vote. It's that important. And don't forget, felons can vote in the state of Oregon. It's a very common misconception that felons cannot vote in Oregon, but it's incorrect. Felons can vote in Oregon, and I'm amazed how many people are surprised to hear that. So I need to keep putting the word out. So anyway, I've got the latest Stop the Drug War headlines. We haven't been doing these in the last few weeks. It's busy and with the Hemp Fest and all. So I sat down and pulled all of them that I haven't done before and together, so just to take a run through. So to remind you, if you are aware of this, this is from the website stopthedrugwar.org, and then these are the chronicles, and these are updates that you can go to their that website and then go to click on the Chronicle tab, and you'll see the headlines and a brief description, and if you want to read more, you can click on the story. So it's a quick way to let you know what kind of news is out there and what's going on. So this is from July 27th, issue 840. It says, worldwide protests set for UN Anti-Drugs Day this Thursday. The UN's annual Anti-Drug Day is Thursday, but this year is going to be met by a counter-campaign called for drug decriminalization, harm reduction, and human rights in the drug war. Support, don't punish protests are being held in 80 cities worldwide. Is yours one? I didn't even know about it. It would have been. So that's something that I need to check on maybe for next year. Let's see. Cops need warrants to search cell phones. Supreme Court rules. In a landmark ruling for privacy rights, a unanimous Supreme Court has held that police may not search the contents of cell phones and other handheld devices incident to arrest. Instead, they must get a warrant. The medical marijuana update, a Senate companion to the successful House DEA defunding amendment has been filed. New York becomes the 23rd medical marijuana state. A CBD bill is moving in North Carolina. Rhode Island retrenches, and more. Medical marijuana passes in New York after last-minute compromises between legislatures and Governor Cuomo. The legislature has approved a medical marijuana bill, and Cuomo anyway says he will sign it, but it's more restrictive than patients and advocates would have liked. This week's corrupt cop stories. Last week it may have been slow on the police corruption front, but we make up for it this week. A Washington SWAT member goes bad. A New York Police Department officer pays for going bad. A former Colorado sheriff also pays a price. An Arkansas cop gets nailed for protecting what he thought was dope loads. And of course, more jail and prison guards get in trouble. Issue 841 for the week of July 3rd, 2014. An industry emerges. The NCIA Cannabis Business Summit in Denver. The marijuana industry has arrived. The National Cannabis Industry Association's Cannabis Business Summit in Denver was last week, and there were way more suits and ties than guys in tie-dyes. Filmmaker Eugene Jarecki talks drug reform. Eugene Jarecki, author of the world-winning drug war documentary, The House I Live In, talks about the film, the war on drugs, and the future. The medical marijuana update. An Arizona researcher gets fired for apparently political reasons. New medical-related laws come into effect in several states. California dispensary conflicts continue as the Assembly grapples with a statewide regulation bill and more. 2 more drug war deaths. A Texas man has drowned fleeing a drug bust, and a Florida man has been shot and killed during one. They became the 22nd and 23rd persons to die in U.S. domestic drug law enforcement operations so far this year. This week's corrupt cop stories. There seems to be a lot of cops with pain pill problems these days, but we also have more old-fashioned drug war corruption, such as stealing and reselling drug evidence and tipping off dope dealers. Issue 842, this was on July 10th, 2014. The 2014 National Drug Control Strategy, the 2014 National Drug Control Strategy, titled Baby Steps in the Right Direction. This year's National Drug Control Strategy was released today. There are some steps in the right direction, but otherwise it pretty much looks like every annual drug strategy for the past 20 years. The D.C. Marijuana Initiative hands in plenty of signatures. An initiative that would legalize the possession and cultivation of small amounts of marijuana appears poised to qualify for the ballot after organizers handed in more than twice the needed number of signatures. I assume that's for, I think they already have medical, so I believe that's for recreational. Yes, that's right, it is. New York becomes a medical marijuana update. New York becomes the 23rd medical marijuana state. North Carolina becomes a high CBD cannabis oil state. Utah issues the first permits for high CBD cannabis oil. Californians prepared to lobby for a statewide regulation bill, and more. Florida man is killed in a SWAT raid over small-time marijuana sales. A Tampa man was shot and killed by a police SWAT team over marijuana sales totaling less than $200. In an unusual twist, the local newspaper actually did an in-depth investigation of the accidents, and the results aren't pretty. Denver man shot, killed in undercover drug operation. A Denver SWAT team member shot and killed a target of an undercover drug investigation when he pulled a weapon as uniformed cops moved in for an arrest. This week's corrupt cop stories. We present a trio of law enforcement miscreants, including a Houston deputy who was ripping off dealers and selling their wares, a North Carolina cop with a pill problem, and a Baltimore schools cop who was flipping rocks on the side. Wow. Yep, that's why. So anyway, moving on, we're at issue 843, which is July 1st. I think I said July, but I meant to say June on the last one. This is July 1st. White House weighs in on D.C. marijuana reform battle. The White House has spoken directly about House Republicans' efforts to block the District of Columbia from implementing its new decriminalization law. It doesn't approve, and it cites states' rights and home rule. It joins a slew of D.C. residents and officials telling Congress to bug off. Chronicle interview, drug policy research Bo Kilmer. Marijuana policy research and analyst Bo Kilmer talks to the Chronicle about marijuana legalization, taxation, public health, and related issues. There's plenty to chew on here. The House votes to let banks take deposits from marijuana businesses. In a historic vote Wednesday, the U.S. House has approved an amendment to the Treasury Department Appropriations Bill, barring the agency from spending any money to punish financial institutions that provide services to marijuana businesses where it is legal. The medical marijuana update. A CBD cannabis oil bill becomes law in Missouri. The District of Columbia expands its medical marijuana program. Michigan prepares to improve its program. Berkeley will provide free medical marijuana for the poor and homeless. An LA medical marijuana farmers market gets an injunction slapped on it, and more. This week's corrupt cop stories. More cops with pill problems, more jail guards looking to earn a little easy money. Just another week in the corrupt cop front of the drug war. Issue 844, dated July 24th. U.S. drug policy and the border child immigration crisis. With tens of thousands of Central American children and adolescents arriving at the U.S. border, the roots of the crisis tend to be obscured by partisan bickering over what is to be done and who is to blame. There's a good argument the war on drugs deserves some credit. Sentencing Commission cuts up to 46,000 drug war prisoner sentences. Late last week, the U.S. Sentencing Commission extended sentencing reforms for federal drug defendants to include people who are already serving their sentences. Some 46,000 drug war prisoners could see cuts averaging about 2 years. The Oregon Marijuana Initiative campaign qualifies for the November ballot, and we know about that. Medical marijuana update. Medical marijuana takes another step towards self-regulation. Patients and supporters rally for a fired Arizona medical marijuana researcher. Illinois expands its medical marijuana program, and more. And this is a good one. FedEx indicted on criminal charges for shipping internet pharmacy drugs. A federal grand jury in San Francisco has indicted FedEx on charges it had conspired to distribute controlled substance over its shipments of prescription drugs for illegal online pharmacies. FedEx says it will fight the charges. This week's a few of the corrupt stories. So anyway, that's a wrap up for this week's show, and I appreciate you coming in. You can always come by behind the Sheldon High School at our studios on Monday nights at 7:30. Come on by, say hi. You could be on the show, you could just watch. Come by and visit. See you next time.